Decoded Man here. ChiefMessenger doesn't understand the problem of evil. Here he is. Here we go. Okay, so he's talking about Alex's going against these atheists, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is his argument, okay? Or what he thinks the argument is, which is the argument of evil. That evil exists. And evil is incompatible with a loving, powerful God, which, of course, he screws up.
Not only do you explain this, you also come to expect.
Let's break this down. Is it a powerful argument? Well, a lot of people claim that because pain, suffering, war, famine, and disease exist, God must not exist, or a good God for that matter. Actually,
yeah, that good card part is the whole point of the problem of evil. Let me go ahead and present to you the amazing MS Paint job I've done here. So you can have a loving God or you can have a powerful God, but you cannot have both if there is suffering. Why? Because suffering is an indication that it is, well, we should say all loving, is an indication that you're not all loving. Because a loving being like me, just for example, I don't want suffering to be a thing. I don't like it, no thanks. I'd rather not have that be a thing. And I don't see any good reason to have it if I could change it. If I had power to change it. Now, power, of course, like an ability, it's sort of like that you have magical powers, or maybe you just had the knowledge of how to negate suffering. That would be nice. So if I had a way to cure some disease, because I care a little bit about humans, if I don't release that cure to humanity, then I really don't care about humans that much. Maybe I'll release it, but only if I get money, because I'm greedy. So I'm more greedy than I am loving, right? But I'm definitely not all loving because I demand a certain thing for my cure, and when I could have given it away for really cheap or maybe even free, So the point here is you cannot have a God that is both all powerful and all loving. It has to be one or the other. It cannot be both if there is suffering or evil. But I don't like to say evil because I know that apologists will take that and run with it and go, well, but evil doesn't exist unless there's a God or whatever. So, I just stay with suffering because that's more straightforward. But if there's a God and you propose that it's all powerful, fine, but it's not all loving. Or it's all loving, but it's not all powerful, because suffering exists, and suffering should not exist if both of these are true at the same time. That's the argument of evil, okay? And all the excuses that you offer don't work. But let's hear him give excuses anyways, because that's all he's got.
not that many people, mostly Alex O'Connor, an atheist YouTube personality who debates Christians. But does it mean that God cannot exist if suffering exists? This argument has been brought up throughout time. People have seen terrible things on the television or heard about terrible things in a newspaper in their own hometown, or maybe they know somebody that has been affected deeply by some sort of suffering. And so the argument usually goes as follows. A good God would not allow suffering. Suffering exists. Therefore, God does not exist. Let's go one more time. A good God wouldn't allow suffering. They presume that a good God exists. And suffering exists within God's creation. Therefore, God does not exist.
Yeah, nice little straw man there. I see that you got rid of the good God. See, premise one is a good, powerful God. So you're already not even doing the actual argument. A good God wouldn't allow suffering, but suffering exists. So a good God doesn't exist. That would be this argument.
Because he wouldn't allow suffering within his creation if he is good. This argument being used by a lot of people means it's going to be very beneficial for us to break down. First, the assumption is made that God's existence and suffering are mutually exclusive, that they
No, the statement is that a all-loving, all-powerful God is incompatible with suffering. But you all you can do is straw man it. So yeah, keep going.
exist separate from each other. But suffering existing says nothing about whether God exists or not. It
Right. It only talks about whether a all-loving, all-powerful God exists. An all-loving, all-powerful God is incompatible with suffering. I'm just going to keep saying it because he keeps getting it wrong.
only questions the nature of God and whether he would allow suffering within his creation.
Yeah. And if your God allows suffering, then it's not all loving or it's not all powerful. Because if it was both of those things, then there shouldn't be any suffering at all. Hello? This is the argument. That's the whole point of the argument. So instead of going after the argument, you're going after something else. A weaker version of the argument. That's not even really the argument. Straw man. That's all you're doing. Straw man. I'm a straw man. That's it. That's all you've got. Can you just actually go after the argument? No, of course not. I mean, why? Yeah, and teach whoever comes their way to this video to also not address the argument. Good, great. Yes, just do that. Why not?
So atheists are appealing to God's morality, saying that his creation is not reflective of his morality.
No, atheists are not appealing to God's morality. You're appealing to the proposition that God is all loving, and we recognize love to be a thing that doesn't like suffering. That, if you love and care about someone, you're going to try to make it so that they don't suffer, that they avoid painful things. Now, in life, you are limited because you are human. You can't prevent every single bad thing from happening. But if you could, you would. If you could make this world a place where there was no suffering, you would. And if not, then you're not a very good person. So there you go. Right back to the damn argument that you're not even paying attention to. Jeez.
But this is irrelevant, right?
No.
Because hear me out. Even if God was evil, let's say right now I could snap my fingers.
Oh, well, you just negated half the universe. Dang it.
Make God exist. However, he was evil.
Okay, so there's a reductio ad absurdum God of evil. And this is actually kind of funny that he brings this up, but he gets it completely wrong. So in a reductio ad absurdum version of God, where God is evil, then you would say, well, it can't be all, you'd have to change this. We're going to have to change this here to be something else. So all hateful and all powerful, but let's get rid of that. But good or pleasant. Okay. So good or pleasant feelings exist, yet there is a all-powerful, all-hateful God. Well, that's incompatible, because if it was all hateful, it would want to destroy all good feelings or all pleasant feelings. Therefore, It can't be all hateful and all powerful. And that's the reductio ad absurdum of that version of God. Oh my goodness. But he doesn't even get that one right.
Hypothetically speaking, that is. So then, hypothetically speaking, God still exists, but he's evil within this reality that I'm hypothetically speaking about. And if he is evil, then suffering would just be second nature to his existence and his creation. Just because suffering exists within this hypothetical reality doesn't make God not real. We just said God was real. And so what atheists are attacking.
Yes, if you have a partially non-loving God or a evil God or a somewhat evil God or something like that, or it's just a jerk God, it's just a bumbling buffoon God, then this argument isn't about that God. Duh, this argument is only about a all-loving, powerful God, not a evil God. You nitwit.
Is the morality of God when they don't even believe in
No.
God in the first place.
Okay, so he says this little thing. You don't even believe in God in the first place. Yeah, it's called an eternal critique, you moron. Golly.
So obviously the suffering wouldn't make him not exist. He does exist in this hypothetical reality. What you need to get to the core of is whether God exists or not. So
this attacks a loving, powerful God. You're not just a generic God that isn't loving or isn't all powerful. My word.
many times atheists are attacking God by a presupposition that he is good.
Yeah, you guys say that God is good. Like, isn't that the theist thing to say? So you don't believe your God is good or all loving? Okay, well then the argument's irrelevant to that God. Then your God isn't an all loving God, it isn't an all good God, and therefore could exist. But you now have to admit that your God is not a good God, is not an all loving God. Wonderful, great, terrific.
In the investigation for the search of the proof of God and the existence of God, I often see that atheists will jump over the claim of the existence of God, but rather they'll let their presuppositions of what we might say or their reflection of reality dictate and influence their position on whether God exists. Like we see.
Man, you just can't let reality get in the way of whether or not God exists or not. Just put reality over there to the side.
Here, it's actually irrelevant to whether God is morale or not. For the existence,
it's irrelevant to whether God is moral or not. Don't you mean moral?
of himself, right? Searching and investigating on whether God is real or not. It doesn't matter whether his morality is beneficial to us or not. We're trying to see if he exists.
Sure, we're trying to argue about a God, and we can negate certain ideas of God by observing reality, the thing that you're like, don't worry about that too much, what I'm saying? The reality that we have, there's lots of pain, lots of suffering, lots of things, evil, whatever you want to call it, and therefore, any proposal of an all-powerful, all-loving deity is negated by the fact that we see suffering. So we don't know if it's all loving but not very powerful, or all powerful but not very loving, but we know it's not both. And that only negates one possible version of God. It negates an all-powerful or an all-loving. So you can have one, but you can't have both. Okay? So yes, you could propose that there's an all-powerful God that doesn't love everyone. You can propose that there's an all-loving God that it doesn't have that much power. Fine. Then you've succeeded at getting around the argument of evil by proposing a different God. Great. Now prove that God.
And so this entire argument that this disproves God doesn't really do that. All it might disprove is that God is morale, if that is your presupposition and
Prove that God is morale. What?
reflection of the argument. It has nothing
Do you mean God is amoral? Is that what you meant to say? Oh, sorry.
to do with the existence. Let's continue. And so that leads us into our second point. Secondly, it assumes this argument that suffering proves that a good God does not exist.
No, suffering shows that it all good, or all loving / all powerful. You keep forgetting the all powerful part, but whatever.
That our understanding of good and evil is full, when really an infinitely knowledgeable God would know so much more than we limited humans do.
Okay, so this is the standard. One of the standard responses to the problem of evil is that God simply knows what real love is, and our version of love isn't the real love. Well, that's an appeal to mystery, and it's also appeal to a characteristic of God that you have not established as a thing. You now need another argument to establish that God's version of love is indeed different than our version of love. And if that's the case, the argument still holds, because of course the argument has to be from a human perspective. We are human. And to just appeal to mystery and say, well, but what if God, with all its knowledge, knows something about suffering that we don't know, and in our puny minds, where we would imagine that if I personally, if I had the power to negate suffering worldwide, I would do it. Why would I not do it? So I can't think of any reason why I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want suffering anymore. Now, of course, there's caveats with that, because there's problems that would be caused from no suffering. But then again, if there really was no suffering, then there wouldn't be any problems caused from no suffering. So, because problems are suffering. So, yeah. But if love is no longer the sort of love that we understand, then your God can't be said to be all loving, because the word no longer means anything. Your God is all blargo blarg, where blargo blarg equals whatever God thinks love is, that we don't have any idea what that is. And then you're arguing for a different God that still failed this argument, and has a different argument for it, where the blargo blarg allows it to allow suffering, because our type of love is not what you're arguing for. The God love. God is all God love / all powerful. And God love is different than human love. Okay, cool. That's nice. Now prove that there's an all God love, that there's a different version of love. You can't just say, well, maybe it's a thing, or maybe that's what God is like. You need to show that that's what God is like. But this is a typical response, appeal to mystery, and somewhat of a circular argument. And there's a lot of assumptions being made here too. But at any rate, yeah. No. If it isn't our type of love, then I don't care about your God.
He is unlimited. He is infinite, while we are limited and finite.
How do you know that?
Isaiah 45:9.
How do you know that? Oh, here we go. Okay, quoting the Bible. Don't care what the Bible says.
And this came to mind when I was talking about this argument. Isaiah 45:9. Does the clay say to the potter, what are you making? It goes on, and I recommend you read more of that, but
all right, you want to quote Isaiah? How about Isaiah 45:7? I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do these things. There you go. All right. Yeah, just quote the one thing that you like. All right, that's fine.
tend to question God. We want to say that we would do it better as the ruler.
I would do it better. God sucks. But there isn't a God that sucks. I'm just saying your version of God sucks. Just to make it clear, the deity that you imagine to exist really sucks at its job. And yes, I would do better than it.
And king. If God does exist, he's the one shaping our reality. He's the one that determines what happens.
Right, and thus that God is a real jerk because it shaped reality in such a way that we would have to endure suffering, and not just humans, but other creatures have to endure suffering. Why would God do that? It must be a jerk.
Not us. If he tells us he's good, we should take him on his word because he's our creator. Like the pot looking up at the potter saying,
no, I shouldn't take anyone, even God, at its word. If you tell me you're good, but then you proceed to poke me in the eye, I don't think you're good anymore. And your God is essentially letting us be poked in the eye because I don't. Its love is different than ours, or some bullshit. I don't know.
why have you fashioned me this way? Does the pot have any right to tell the potter why he was made that way?
Yes, the pot actually, if the pot's alive, yes, it does.
No. So instead of asking, can a good God allow suffering, we should really be investigating whether God exists in the first place.
The point, oh my, the argument just went right past you, like over your head. Amazing.
If the answer is yes, then we can start to ask questions about his reality and his creation.
But how would you establish that God is real when you can't even handle the argument of evil? I don't think that you're going to be able to handle the complicated argument that would have to exist for you to argue that your God exists. You can't even actually understand basic argumentation when it comes to this well-known argument. You have displayed an utter ignorance in regards to it. I don't think that you're qualified to give us any sort of argument that would get us close to thinking that God exists, let alone do any research that would find evidence that God exists or build any machine that could show us that God exists. You just aren't that person. Now, there's hope for you because you could learn informal logic. I don't think you will, but you could. And maybe, just maybe if you did, you would understand how broken your arguments are that you offer in this video. You would understand that you didn't even address the actual argument, and you would then maybe shape a different argument that is free of logical fallacies and then present that instead. Instead of avoiding the problem as you did, you'd actually address the problem, and then maybe you would admit that God isn't all powerful and or that God isn't all loving, and fine, then we can move past this argument. But you're still going to need an argument that God does exist in some way, shape, or form, and the only way that you're going to have a hope to do that is by educating yourself on informal logic. Otherwise, it's just going to keep being bad videos. All right, so you didn't offer us anything at all, and that's it. So we have to be skeptical of your conclusions, and wow, it's just amazing. Well done. Not. Okay, so be sure to tell him that he's wrong about everything on his channel, and also then post on this video so that, you know, YouTube will give me cookies. Until next time, be skeptical, and after next time, stay skeptical.